Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Attendees are dropping in now, which is lovely to see, or not to see you all, but to see your names on the list, at least as you're joining us this afternoon. And welcome to this Rail Freight Group webinar. Today's topic is cybersecurity. So something that's a little bit out of the ordinary for us, but a topic that is increasingly important across all businesses. We talk a lot in the rail industries about digital signalling, a digital coupler of wagons, technology projects which are helping to automate timetabling, and a real pressure to more digitisation and more automation within our industries. And I suppose cybersecurity is the opposite side of that coin, and something that we've heard a huge amount around during lockdown, as internet fraud and scams have been on the increase for all of us, I think. So timely, I think, that we take some time to talk about that today on this webinar. I'm delighted that you've been able to join us. In terms of our format, our running order for today, we have three speakers. Dr. Emma Bradford from Frazer Nash Consultancy, Marie Hill from DB Cargo UK, and Daniel Jaggi from Razorsecure. We'll ask each of them to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll introduce them more as we go into that. But then after that, we've got plenty of time for questions and discussion on the topic. So if something hasn't been answered that you want to know a bit more about, or you've got a question on something that you've heard, please do drop your question into the Q&A and we'll pick them up at the end. Or you can pop them into the chat function if that's easier for you, and we'll look out for them there as well. But please do drop us through your questions, and we've got plenty of time to cover them off at the end. In terms of housekeeping, we are recording the webinar. That means it will be available on our YouTube channel tonight or tomorrow. So you'll be able to watch it on there if you can't stay for the whole hour, or if some of your colleagues want to watch it later on, that'll be available for you. And if you want a copy of any of the presentation slides, please email Yvonne and she'll get those out to you later this week. If you just come through to her, and I'm sure you all know her email address, but if not, it's Yvonne at Rail Freight Group RFG, Yvonne at rfg.org.uk, and she can get those across to you. So I think that's all for me on the housekeeping. Do keep your questions coming and let us know in the chat or the Q&A if you need anything more. So let us move on. So our first speaker today is Dr. Emma Bradford. Emma is the head of Behavioural Psychology Unit at Frazer Nash Consultancy, with expertise in forensic psychology and behavioural psychology. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the human elements of security and what that means for your business. So Emma, thank you very much for being with us today. And if you want to introduce yourself and take it from there, thank you.
Lovely. So I shall start by unmuting myself, which is always a good start. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Bradford, and as Maggie said, I head up Frazer Nash's Behavioural Psychology Unit, or BPU, as we lovingly call ourselves. We sit within the cyber group, and our responsibility is to better understand and intervene when it comes to the human element of cybersecurity and cyber vulnerabilities. So we believe this is a very important stance to be taking, because often cybersecurity is passed off as a purely technological problem, when really to attack it and to address it most effectively, you need to take a holistic approach towards it. Let's share my screen now and talk you through some work which I have done recently, looking at organizational resilience to cyber attacks from a people and process perspective. Can you see my slides? If someone can give me a nod. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so organizational resilience is the ability of an organization to anticipate, withstand, recover from, and adapt to adverse changes in the environment and still function effectively. In the realm of cyber resilience, this means that it's not about just protecting against a cyber attack from happening, it's about how an organization responds to and recovers from an attack should it happen. Description of it there. So there are a number of events that highlight the importance of organizational resilience, not only cyber attacks, but we are living through one right now with COVID-19. And the dramatic and sudden change in working practices means We've all been flung into this different way of working, which can come with its own vulnerabilities and issues. In terms of resilience, it's inherently different for different organizations, and no organization, person, network, or system can be absolutely resilient, but there are different elements of best practice that we can aspire to and work towards to ensure that should something happen in terms of cyber attacks, we're as best prepared to respond as effectively as we can. I'm going to talk to you today about what's known as the Prepare project, and this was the result of some work we were commissioned to look at, and this was research into organizational resilience to cyber attacks from a people and process perspective. The work was essentially to understand and identify any key behavioural components of resilient organisations, particularly those that are resilient to cyber attacks. So this was about identifying what good looks like from a people and process perspective. So going above and beyond whether people have firewalls, where they have appropriate technological solutions to help prevent cyber attacks. What people and process elements are in place that mean that if an attack should happen, how do people respond and how do they recover? The overarching purpose of this work was to help the client plan its approach to resilience management and assist its investment decisions. So to understand how they could provide interventions to make their workforce more resilient. In terms of the work that we conducted, we did a literature review of peer-reviewed academic journals, published industry guidance, and national and international standards. Now, there's not all that much research out there about cyber resilience specifically, so we did draw on more general resilience literature as well. So this looked at things like physical resilience and security resilience more broadly than just cyber resilience. In addition to the literature review, we conducted some in-depth interviews with a sample of organisations across different sectors. These were from sectors like the finance sector, from government, from defence, and from the transport industry also. We conducted these in-depth interviews just to really put the problem in context and to understand whether or not there were different industry nuances to cyber resilience. We conducted some thematic analysis on all of the results and identified 19 key themes from a people and process perspective that seem to be really important in achieving a resilient organisation. 19 is a bit too many things to remember, so we organised the different items into 7 overarching categories, and this led to the development of the Prepare model. Each of the categories outlines a general area of interest which needs to be addressed when considering organisational resilience to cyber attacks. The first is to preside, and this deals with issues like leadership and governance, and making sure that the organisation has a real clarity of purpose in terms of cyber security. This is particularly important in sectors like your own sector, where there are competing objectives with things like getting the job done, getting things to places on time, safety, as well as other physical security. So it's really about framing cybersecurity in and amongst all these different things and ensuring that there's clear guidance and governance of this issue. Resource refers to how much effort is dedicated to the cyber security mission. This includes availability of resources. This includes providing a multidisciplinary cyber team to ensure that when we're looking at cyber problems, all aspects of an organisation or business are included to understand all the different areas where such an issue might have an effect. This can also include things like having an established reporting structure. So if a cyber attack were to happen, or if something were to go wrong, do people know about the chain of events, who they should contact, how it should be escalated, how the message should be disseminated? Educate is the next bucket of items, and this does what it says on the tin and talks about education and awareness. Do people know what they should and shouldn't be looking out for? Do they know how to respond if something were to happen? Do they know who to tell, when to tell it? Publicize talks about things in the realm of information and knowledge sharing. So especially in areas like yourselves, where there are so many different moving parts, if something happened in one area, is that communicated to other areas? Are lessons learned shared? And are messages shared in a timely and effective manner? Does everybody know what they need to know when they need to know it? Acclimatize is the next theme, which looks more at security culture, understanding the context in which you're dealing with cyber threats. And also, again, a element which is probably particularly interesting in your line of work is the supply chain element. So understanding how that might affect your vulnerability to cyber attacks and what you can do to try and assure or to harden your people and processes as best possible to protect against cyber attacks and recover from them should they happen. The last two refer to rehearsing and evaluating. So this is about, I always forget the word. I did this last time as well. Drilling, that's it. Sorry, I've got terrible baby brain. This is about creating exercises and drilling that. So in the event that something happens, are we prepared? Are we able to shortcut some of those cognitive processes because we know what we should be doing, we've practiced what we should be doing, and we have prepared, excuse the pun, for such events. We know what we're doing, and therefore we can be quicker and more effective in doing it. And finally, evaluating. This is really important with any intervention, I would argue, to make sure that if you're making changes, if you are adopting mitigations or interventions, are we assessing how well they are doing? If we put out a training and education package, have people understood this, etc.? And this is just about a constant evolution of approach to be really aware of how and why we're doing what we're doing and whether or not it's working. The benefits of this model are that it can help people understand the process and people factors that affect organizational resilience to cyber attacks. So just understanding all the different factors that can actually have an impact. It can help people appraise their own performance against best practice and also identify areas for improvement. In doing that, it's possible to identify, once you've identified the gaps, to understand what practical recommendations could be adopted to improve resilience. This can be done in a prioritized way to ensure that we're identifying those quick wins and we're making efforts to make a start on those longer term projects, which might require a bit more time and effort. All in all, the purpose of this type of model is to better target our resources and increase their effectiveness and be able to monitor the effectiveness. So although this model was originally designed to address organizational resilience to cyber attacks, the model itself and looking at the problem from a people and process perspective makes it quite threat agnostic. So whether we're talking about a cyber attack or another event like a global pandemic, any event that disrupts business as usual, these are the kind of people and process things that we should be considering and that we should be assessing to make sure that we are as resilient as we can be. Conscious of time, and that has gone really quickly, but that is a very quick introduction to the PREPARE model and how we can use it to assess organizational resilience to cyber attacks from a people and process perspective.
Thank you very much, Emma. That's really interesting. I think, as you were going through the model there, I think we can, sort of reflect back, as you say, on some of the things that we've had to do as businesses during the COVID journey, to call it that, and see how the model, which is built around cyber threats, can also have that sort of cross threat approach and structure as well. I'm sure we'll have some questions on that as we move forward, and those attending, please do keep your questions coming. But let us move on now. Marie Hill, who's the Chief Transformation and Digitalisation Officer at DB Cargo, is going to talk to us, I think, about something which you probably think of is going to be a surprising title, which is making cybersecurity fun, memorable and engaging. And I think we probably be really interested to understand, Marie, what you've been doing in this space and the results you've had. So many thanks, Marie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I'll just share screen. So hopefully, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that, Maggie? Can you see? Perfect, thank you very much. So hello everybody, my name's Marie Hill. I'm the Chief Transformation and Digital Officer here at DB Cargo UK. For those of you that don't know us, we're a rail logistics company and we move trains both inside the UK and into Europe. Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual one. It kind of feeds on from what Emma was saying around the people element of cybersecurity. We've been on quite a journey at DB. So I took over as head of IT at the beginning of 2017. And I can honestly say cybersecurity did not enter my radar or sphere of awareness for probably the first 4 months. If I just move on. And the first notice that I had of cybersecurity was on a Saturday in May 2017. I was going out with some friends and one of my suppliers rang me and said, you need to come into the office immediately. We've been hit by a cyber attack. And it turned out that it was WannaCry. Now, I will say I am not a techie person. So this for me was probably my worst nightmare. I went into the office, I had no idea what we were dealing with, no idea how it impacted us. And in the end, we were actually really lucky. We lost about 7 servers that day, and it took us about a week to build everything back up again. But I always say what it did give me was probably the best fundamental grounding in where I didn't ever want to be again as head of IT. So we started a journey post WannaCry of looking at repairing our defences and all our, let's say, the technical view of cybersecurity. So did we have the right equipment? Was everything up to date? Did we have, as Emma mentioned, the right firewalls in place? And once all that was done, I became more aware of how cyber is, yes, driven by technology, but actually the underpinning success of cybersecurity is all around people. It's about knowing what to do when, in the event of an incident. It's about understanding what doesn't look right. So we worked together with the comms team to try and understand how we really got people engaged with cybersecurity, because it was pretty clear after doing our first phishing exercise that our people didn't really know what to look out for. They didn't really understand what cybersecurity was and why it was important to them, not just in their working environment, but in our day-to-day lives as well. And the way that we did that, we created a movie, which I will play in a minute. It lasts for about 3 minutes. And I wanted to create a buzz of excitement that something was coming and something was changing and it was different to how we normally do things. So we created the screening, which is kind of a play on the traditional horror movie, all around some monsters that get into your work environment. And we had movie posters up, we gave tickets out for a movie premiere, we sent movie packs, because a lot of our people are remote people. We don't see them day to day, they don't work in one single office. So in our head office, we had people come to a movie premiere, but for our remote employees, our train drivers, our ground staff, our engineers, we sent everybody movie packs with their ticketing, a brochure around the monsters. And the idea was that we kicked off our, I don't even want to call it a campaign, because it was all to do with our DNA around cybersecurity, around engagement with a movie. So if I play the movie, then I'll talk about how we brought the monsters to life. So if you could give me a thumbs up, Maggie or Emma, because I can see you if you can hear it.
In a world where nothing is safe,
Thanks.
where danger lurks around every corner, where we have to watch our every move, Team Red Productions brings you The Screening.
They're everywhere, those pesky little monsters. They're trying to steal your files, take your personal data, corrupt our systems and steal from you. They find their way onto your system through fraudulent emails, weak passwords, USB sticks with their evil viruses and malware. And it's not just me, it's all of us. Your PC, tablet and phones. We're all under threat from these little monsters, all the time. We need your help to stop them.
Almost half of the businesses in Britain were the victims of cyber attacks in the last year. And you can be sure of one thing, they're coming after you. But using your powers for good, you can stop these unspeakable monsters. And there are 4 you really need to watch out for.
Firstly, there's Lockdown, who's just waiting for you to leave your device unattended. So remember to switch it off or put your device to sleep when you're away from it, and make sure it's password protected. Using his superpower, he's just waiting for you to leave the door open for him. Secondly, watch out for Peaky Finder, a really sneaky monster, looking for an easy way into your device. So protect all your devices with strong passwords. Use numbers, capital letters and symbols for your passwords, and change them as often as you can. He can crack a weak password in seconds. Third in our gang of 4, there's Link Lurker, the phishing expert. Never click on a link in an email unless you're absolutely sure it's genuine. Remember, even fraudulent emails can look like the real thing. He's just waiting for you to click. Finally, introducing the imposter, posing as legitimate software or programs hiding on things like USB sticks. So don't use your personal removable media such as USB sticks or SD cards in company devices. He can't wait for you to let him in.
Be an IT security hero. Don't let the 4 monsters in. Follow the simple tips and watch out for them making an appearance shortly on a screen near you. Together we're strong. And with these 4 weapons of hack destruction, we can keep your data safe and sound.
Remember, you are our first line of defense. Follow these simple tips and the little monsters won't be coming soon to a screen near you.
So we launched the movie, and the main thing that I wanted to do when we changed how we do this, I wanted a completely different look and feel. I wanted to do something where cybersecurity was fun, was memorable. It didn't look like anything that we'd done before, and I had a horror moment for part of doing this that the CEO at the time would absolutely hate it. But actually what it did is create quite a buzz around the company, and we did lots of things post launching the movie. So we had monster months where we focused on one monster, and we did case studies and hints and tips. And we also had kind of email templates where if something was contextually relevant, I remember the Heathrow Airport lost a memory stick, and it caused they were fined quite a lot of money, and it gave us a really great way to use the imposter and to make a learning story from that for our people. And one of the best things for me is it became something that we made little pin badges with the monsters on. So if people reported a phishing email, they got a little pin badge with Link Lurker on, and there was quite a high level of competition to try and get access to all the monsters. So for me, it was around making cybersecurity something that, you know, even working as head of IT is quite a boring topic, and you know, we write really great policies, but we don't really find a way to bring them to life. So for me, the little monsters was all around making cybersecurity fun and engaging, making it memorable, simple, easy language with really nice visuals. And we finished the campaign with little tiny short snippets of movies around remote working, for example, as we came into COVID at the beginning of last year, and kind of how the monsters could still be around in the current environment. So hopefully it was interesting to see some of the ways that we brought the monsters to life and use those to help build engagement. I can say, as I think Emma mentioned on one of her slides around measurement, that the phishing success was better when we did it the second and third times. Still not brilliant, we still have work to do, but it does seem to have really helped us land some of those key, simple, basic messages around IT security and cybersecurity hygiene. So yeah, that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. And it's always really interesting to see how different people approach these topics. And I think it's lovely to see something that's sort of fresh and interesting and a bit different. So well done. Marie, if you could just drop your slides for me, that would be lovely. Thank you very much. So again, please keep your questions coming and we will come to those at the end. But our third speaker today is Daniel Jaggi, who's the Head of Business Development at Razorsecure. And Daniel's going to be looking at the challenge of cybersecurity for rail and how operators and asset owners can become more secure. So perhaps the other side of the question to some degree. But Daniel, thank you very much for joining us today, and over to you. Thank you.
And I'll unmute myself as well. Thank you very much, Maggie. So yes, as Maggie said, we're a little bit different here in that we are very much focused on systems and system protection, and very much focused on rail. And the aim of this talk is to give you a bit of a flavour of what you should be mindful of as operators and asset owners of rolling stock, particularly digital rolling stock in a sort of new cyber age. Sorry, my slides aren't going, but there they are now. So first, a bit about us. So Razorsecure, well, we're rail cybersecurity specialists, so that's all we do essentially. We're very much focused on rail systems, particularly on rolling stock systems, but we also go into wayside systems too. We're UK based. We're currently 23 employees, and we've got roughly 1,600 rail vehicles protected. And by the end of the year, we're in a sort of rapid growth phase as well. We'll have 6 operators by the year end. Some of the customers and partners we work with are on the right hand side there. In terms of our actual deployments, depending where you are in the country, you may have actually been on a train which is protected by some of our software. So the 2 main UK deployments we have are West Midland trains and Northern trains, and both of those we're protecting communications gateways on the rolling stock there, which is providing both passenger Wi-Fi as well as connectivity for a whole range of onboard operational systems as well. And I'll go into detail kind of what that's actually about and why we're doing that, but fundamentally we're adding a layer of monitoring protection to those fleets and helping those operators and the underlying ROSCOs with protection of those assets. So looking at rolling stock, I think a fundamental observation is that new rolling stock is digital. 20 years ago, there were systems with serial buses and the range of digitization and offboard connectivity that generally wasn't there at all, actually. But new vehicles today have digital systems. They have IP backbones. They have IP-based communication protocols between those systems. They have communications, and many other subsystems are using that connectivity for a whole range of reasons as well. So, in essence, a train today is a digital data center and connectivity platform as much as it is a piece of metal and propulsion. And this is something you need to be very much mindful of, because our kind of core contention is that the connectivity and digitization that have been added to these vehicles adds vulnerability very, very clearly. The diagram here is, it's a typical passenger network diagram, but it's very much applicable to a locomotive as well that may be used in a rail freight scenario. You have different tiers, different zones from communication, so passenger network, but crew networks equally as well, where there are wireless connectivity, there are board to ground communications via LTE, so 4G connectivity. There are operational systems connected to an onboard network with a variety of functions. Some of these, again, DAS systems, video surveillance systems, information systems. And then there are, the train control management systems, and everything that's attached to that, and including increasingly, obviously, ETCS components, ERTMS, which have GSMR links to wayside systems. And all of these are connected. The point here is that these are not isolated systems that are operating in a vacuum. They are being joined up and linked together, and they're sharing communications channels, and they're sharing functionality between themselves. And this adds vulnerability. And the risk of this, I mean, isn't sort of just hypothetical. I've just brought up 2 transportation examples, but Maersk famously, 2017 was hit by actually it was a piece of malware that encrypted a lot of their data. So it wasn't directly a hack, as in a hacking of a system, but it was a severe crippling of core business systems, which caused them, I think it was $300 million hit, which is significant and a major disruption to their operations. In the rail sector, Stadler, last summer, their core IT was hit by a ransomware attack. And that was actually a data center system that was attacked and compromised. And again, it brought a lot of the core functions down in Stadler. But interestingly, it also took down some of the board to ground communications, which brings me on to the point of what are the drivers for this digitization and connectivity. Fundamentally, it's about operational efficiency. So people are using digital systems and the data that come from them to improve the operational efficiency of their operations. And that includes things like predictive maintenance and remote condition monitoring. And that's how Stadler was impacted off this as well, because they rely on the connectivity to their data centers. And if you compromise the data center, then, well, where does it stop? If you've got a link between the train and the data center, then actually how you ensure that the systems on board your trains are secure as well. Obviously, using information flow to and from vehicles in real time helps with operations. There's data offload functions, for example, video surveillance. Increasingly we're seeing in the UK operators using forward-facing CCTV and using that for remote offload in case of an incident for more rapid response to any kind of instance on the tracks. There's data analytics as well, so historic performance analysis, and this can lead to efficiencies. In all of that, operators are using data to improve their operations. And our view really is that cyber underpins that as well. If you can't be confident of the either availability, integrity, or confidentiality of that data, then you can't reap the benefits of that data itself. So really our view is that the cyber is absolutely central to the use of data and the use of connectivity in this scenario. But also on the business side as well, I mean, safety is kind of critical too, of course. And data is being used for real-time monitoring. It's used obviously as part of an integral part of ETCS, ERTMS, and it can also be used for incident response and forensic analysis in event recorders. So really, that in the safety critical realm, that cybersecurity is obviously essential as well, because if it's not secure, it's not safe as well. So what are the effects of a cyber attack? Well, when we talk about cyber incidents, they effectively impact a business in one of 3 ways. One is confidentiality, and that's typically the domain of enterprise IT actually. So when you're talking about your laptop or email servers, your databases, the risk here is that fundamentally that it's business critical information is leaked or compromised. That's less a concern obviously on the rolling stock side, unless it's video surveillance information, for example, which could be used in other ways. But availability and integrity absolutely are. So availability is talking about our key systems unavailable until they impact business operations. That's obviously can lead to some quite significant damage. But also the integrity of systems as well. Does the system function as you expect? And when we're talking about safety critical systems, then that has potential safety impact as well, and we need to be mindful of that. One thing we find quite often is, especially in rail, which is cybersecurity is coming. I think digitization's happened quite fast, and I think it's fair to say the rail industry in general hasn't caught up as quickly as it should. And we tend to find actually there's a bit of a it's cyber, it's a little bit scary, and it's easy to be sort of put the blinkers down and ignore the fact that actually cybersecurity is quite easy. And I think this picture kind of encapsulates actually what the essence of cybersecurity really is, because everyone understands this. when installing and when designing for a fastener for a mechanical system, the design work needs to be done. It needs to be correctly designed. It needs to be installed correctly. It needs to be checked. It needs to be signed off, and then it needs to be monitored as well, and repeatedly checked to make sure that the installation parameters are still met over the life cycle of that fastener. And this diagram, I mean, yes, you know what this is. So you install a bolt, you draw a line in it, and then critically you have an inspection regime that goes back and checks if that's still the case. And that could come loose through vibration, or it could be a malicious tampering as well. Either way, and both are true of cybersecurity as well. In cyber world, sort of malicious events as well as configuration drift, parameter, system changing over time because things change, things are upgraded, parts are replaced, is as much an issue as the initial protection. And it's important to bear in mind that really when we're talking about cybersecurity, the process of monitoring actually, as much as Marie and Emma have said, it's very much about process here. Although we're coming from a technological side, it's the monitoring process that's absolutely essential here. Which leads on to some cyber truths. So one of the fundamental misconceptions is that cybersecurity is a process. It's not a state. People tend to have the trap to fall into is to procure a system and say, great, I want the stamp, I want to know that it's secure. And that security only lasts at the point of delivery and at the point of initial configuration. Actually, securing a system is about the process under which that system is operated and the way it's monitored, and risks are managed over the life cycle of that system. And so we need to start thinking in terms of cyber processes, not cyber states. Don't demand stamps, demand processes. Second as well, you can't secure what you don't know about. And one thing we see repeatedly in the rail industry is that asset management is an issue, and that there are many systems being connected and being installed that aren't well then monitored after who has the real-time register of actually what systems are on board, are connected, are operational, are communicating, are functional. It's a critical issue. You can't watch something you don't know exists. So you need to have a good handle on your assets and the systems installed. And finally, then, while you may be secure today, going back to the first point, but how do you know that's true tomorrow? Ongoing monitoring is absolutely critical for security here. And the good thing is that there are well-established cybersecurity frameworks you can lean on. You don't have to do something sophisticated, but you should be following well-known cybersecurity frameworks. And the one here is from the US NIST, the cybersecurity framework there. But they all follow very typical, very similar stages. In this one, there are 5 steps. It's about identification of risks and vulnerabilities. It's about protection of key systems and mitigations of those risks. It's about detection of abnormal events. It's about response to those events, and finally recovery back to a normal state. And this is cyclical as well. So if there is an incident, the learnings from the response and recovery phase feed back into the risk management system and lead to enhanced protection or enhanced monitoring or whatever that may be. But this is the fundamental process that underpins security. And our observation, again, going back to rail, is that most operators today do a pretty good job of identification of risk because of the safety background, and everyone understands risk management processes in businesses. That's core part of a business today. So identification of risk, even though that may be not fully comprehensive as regards cyber risks, the risk management frameworks do exist. But what we tend to find then is that protection of digital systems tends to be lacking somewhat, in that systems aren't secured, aren't hardened, aren't adequately configured to really offer good protection against some of the common vulnerabilities and risks that we see. Furthermore, almost always there's no detection capability, so a system's configured and sent out, and from that point on, no one is aware, is that configuration stable? Has someone tried to compromise that? Has something changed? Has a maintenance operation taken place that's changed the configuration? The detection capability is almost always lacking. And as a result, if you can't detect changes or issues, then you can't respond and recover. So those final 2 phases are almost never there. They're done ad hoc in case of an issue. and they're completely lacking in data to back that up. Again, there are good standards out there as well, and I just want to highlight two of these to you as well. So the first is IEC 62443, which is for industrial control networks, but also the forthcoming the Senelec TS 50701, which is taking 62443 and railwayizing it. And two of the core concepts in that standard are essentially defense in depth. So providing redundant protection in case primary security fails or some vulnerabilities exploited. I don't rely on just the password. You need other measures, other mitigations in place. Similarly as well, zones and conduits is kind of central to a modern connected system. So where you have systems on the same network, which is indeed the case today, you need to divide that into zones with common security requirements and monitor and put in place conduits between zones, i.e. split systems off so that the impact of one system being compromised doesn't impact other systems. Furthermore, the NCSC, so the National Cybersecurity Centre, CAF, is the cyber assessment framework. And this is a framework designed for UK operators of critical infrastructure. And this is a really good framework. Actually, if you haven't seen it already, I recommend you go to the NCSC website and look up the CAF guidance there, because it's comprehensive, well written, very thorough, and very easy to digest. But in that, for example, to highlight some of the technological and rail system relevant bits, they highlight, for example, secure by design, secure management, design for resilience, the need for monitoring, the need for anomaly detection on systems as well. And these are kind of integral parts of secure system management. Again, really good site and really worth looking at. So just some pointers then. So to being mindful of cyber risk, there's a lot to think about, but just to simplify things, I put some sort of key questions that you should be aware of, you should think about yourself. So first, on the asset management side, can you identify all your digital assets aboard your rolling stock today? Do you know the key configuration for those assets, and have you considered obsolescence? What happens if firmware goes out of date? Okay, the ability to patch it. What if the software vendor goes out of business and you can't get new firmware updates? Second, are your digital systems adequately protected? Are you sure that you've got secure system network design and it's configured correctly? Has your fundamental network design and system design got defense in depth or secure by design principles with it? Do you have appropriate authentication means in that network? But very often we see in rail systems that there's assumed trust. Essentially, if you have physical access to a network switch, then you're deemed to be trustworthy, and you get unauthenticated access to systems downstream. And that's something we would challenge as a principle there. Can you monitor your digital systems? Again, if you can't monitor it, you don't know what might be happening. You don't know that things are secure. And the process of monitoring is integral to security. The observation around this as well is that insider threat or non-malicious mistakes are a key risk. Someone swaps out a device, the configuration goes back to default, and suddenly the protections that you've designed in are no longer there, and so you're vulnerable. An insider with sort of key knowledge of the systems can also compromise things without that being aware that something has changed. And then, do you have the processes in place to respond and recover? How would you handle a loss of availability, integrity, or confidentiality? Do you have the forensic information available to help you restore normality? And finally, procuring, I should say as well, and managing digital assets is new, I would say, for many people too. So supply chain risks, change management are central to this. Having the appropriate contractual provisions, particularly on service life and obsolescence. And also increasingly, we were seeing insurance exclusions as well on property and casualty policy as well. So cyber for many years in insurance contracts was deemed silent, as in it made no reference to the impact of cyber events on a loss. But increasingly, the insurance industry is moving to make explicit exclusions for property loss in the case of a cyber incident. So are you aware actually of the true risk that your business is running there? Finally, what we do, obviously, we tackle this head on, and with glee. So, but we're very interested in enhancing railway cybersecurity by protecting networks and monitoring key systems. That's the core of what we do. We do obviously some service-based things, data studies, some risk analysis. We provide monitoring and incident response to operators, but fundamentally we're about adding network and system protection and segregation. We do monitoring through our anomaly detection system, looking for signs of an intrusion. And we provide things like secure access and event logging for systems on board. Great, that's all I want to say, but thank you for listening, and welcome any questions. And particularly as well, again, our background is, our experience state is primarily on passenger fleets, but we'd really welcome dialogue and the opportunity to understand from the freight sector what concerns and what areas of interest there are there particularly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was really interesting, and having run a lot of webinars and indeed conferences over the year, I always think it's interesting how you put three speakers together around a central theme, and yet you can get three totally different angles on the same experience. And I think that's been really great today to hear about this question in lots of different ways. So let's pick up some of the questions that have been coming in, and one or two things as well that thoughts have occurred to me. Let's go on. But I mean, before we do that, I'll just go down the chat. A comment actually from Lynn at Freightliner. Brilliant, innovative and engaging approach by DB. So I think, Marie, you're probably better look out for some cyber coaching going on by your colleagues in other freight operators there. So, but nice feedback there, Lynn. Thank you very much. Okay, let me start with a question. We've got one or two coming in the Q&A, but for those of you, in the industry, what's the cyber security angle that keeps you awake at night? What's your biggest worry? Marie, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think Daniel mentioned it actually. It's fear of the unknown, and I think the speed at which cybercrime moves, it's almost like they attract the best talent in cyber, and so I think there's the fear of the unknown, and I think resting on your laurels. So, and it's almost, you can never be prepared enough, and I think that's the thing. And on a personal level inside my own organization, I'd say it's probably the responsiveness, so that the business continuity management, and because digital is just embedded everywhere in our business now, and it will only grow, it's actually making sure that everybody else is aware that you have to practice. So I think that resilience inside our business is probably the thing that probably keeps me up most at night.
Daniel, from your perspective, you're working across our industry. What, even if it's not keeping you awake, what do you think is the thing that should be keeping people awake, perhaps?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, we don't like to overham, the risks and the impact, but obviously, there is a risk to safety because there are safety critical systems being connected, and that's something I think that's probably underappreciated in the industry. So that's probably absolutely number one. But the potential, I think, for large scale disruption of the rail network through a coordinated cyber attack. Again, we don't, no one's tried it yet, and this is, looking with a backward lens is wrong here, but the potential exists for someone, with the means and the desire to have serious disruption, because there are vulnerable systems out there for sure.
And do you see that more? I mean, obviously, that risk increases as we move to digital signalling and systems like that. But, across the sort of portfolio of systems we've got today, I'm no IT expert, but there are systems in this industry that predate me starting school. Is that where the worry is, or is it in some of the sort of newer, more connected systems?
It's probably in the newer systems. I think there's a limit to what you can do with an older system, and there's also limited connectivity on those systems as well. It's probably in the interim. I think, look, if you fast forward 5 years, I think we'd see, well designed and well implemented systems. It's the system bridging that gap that with digital, maybe 5-6 years ago, where security really wasn't a strong concern, but it's still being produced and rolled out today, albeit with mitigations with other things in place. But yeah, there is some way to come, I would say, in the industry to bring the security, the protection, and the monitoring up to speed. And one thing when you mentioned signaling, yes, clearly ETCS introduces new risks, and the criticality of those risks is increased. It is true that the level of security design in those systems is better, absolutely. But we should still be mindful of it. And again, because things are being integrated, because there is the connectivity, that you can't assume that these systems are air-gapped and fully segregated from each other. That doesn't exist.
You know, I suppose if I thought about, you know, the nature of our industry, obviously, you know, network around is a very big dominant player who's going to be at the heart of some of these systems, and, you know, or if it hasn't already got the scale and the resource and the knowledge to you know, to design these in an appropriate way. But you know, this goes out to a whole host of smaller and more diffuse organisations and the operators and the supply chains beyond them. How do we get the right balance, I suppose, of expertise and design in that to make sure that those interfaces are managed? Is it about everybody employing very clever people to manage it? Is it about the system design? You know, is it I'm going to say Marie's video is simple, but, you know, is it about that simple messaging? What's that balance between design and management, I suppose?
I mean, I think the process element comes first. If you adopt good cyber risk management processes, then naturally it falls out that you put requirements on your suppliers, you put requirements on change management processes, you put requirements on the obsolescence management, for example, to have those risks covered, and you do put the requirements on the monitoring and the capabilities in the organization to deal with those. So that will be the starting point for me, and I think naturally the rest falls out. And also then as well, the system vendors, the rolling stock manufacturers do you know, bring things along with them. It's not incumbent on the operator or the procurer to come up with a solution as well, but they need to set the requirements appropriately so that's met.
Okay, a question come in. What's the panel's view on how soon you should communicate a cyber attack to customers and business partners? Is the view to be upfront or keep it under wraps as much as possible until you've sorted it out? Any thoughts on that one?
I think I would take the traditional psychologist perspective on this and say it depends. So not a very definitive answer, but I think it would very much depend on the situation and on the impact, because obviously you've got to balance the benefits for security with your business and damaging effects that reputational issues could have if they are unwarranted. From an information sharing point of view, obviously in the prepare model, one of the key themes is publicized. So to have this information sharing capability in a network or in a sector. However, there is an inherent reluctance to do this in every single sector because nobody wants to admit weakness, nobody wants to be that weak link in the chain. However, if we are to unite to fight these, like Marie said, all the seemingly very good cyber talent goes to, seems to be in the nefarious sector, but we need to be able to share information in a sensible way that is protective of IP, etc. But it's essential to identify lessons learned, to stem problems before they flurry down the supply chain and create even more issues. So, like I said, it depends. My stance would be that it would be really, it would not be helpful to suppress information. Whether you come out with it straight away and say this has happened, or whether it's a retrospective, we've dealt with it, this is how we did it, etc., would very much depend on the situation, in my view.
Thoughts from anyone else?
Yeah, I probably agree with Emma, to be honest, Maggie, on that. And I think the triage initially of what's happening in your organisation, what's the impact, how is that affecting you, is probably the first thing. And most good business continuity plans would have stakeholder management within the communication plan of that incident. But there are elements, and when we were hit with WannaCry, I didn't realise at the time, but NCSC, BTP have a really great cyber security link who can actively come in and help you if they know. So there is some value to calling those experts in sooner rather than later. I think Daniel mentioned it around the forensic information that can be gathered, and particularly dependent upon what's impacted. that can spread to other organizations, particularly nowadays when we have so many integrated systems and forms of EDI between organizations. So I think there is a sense of ownership and responsibility around some form of communication, but probably based on the triage of what's going on first.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think agreed, though I observed two things, I guess. One is that I don't recall a cyber instance where, if the organisation involved had acted faster or with more disclosure, it would have worsened things, as in generally people are too slow to react and too reluctant to disclose. And similar as well, exactly, Maria, just picking up your point, if you have, part of it as well, if you don't know what's going on, if you don't have the information, then you're flying blind. But the value of having that forensic data at your hands means you're more able to react in a coherent fashion, and that should be the goal, actually.
Okay, so a comment in from I think one of your colleagues, Daniel, about hacking demonstrations being another way that complements the sort of work that Marie had indicated around showing people what had happened. So just a question from me actually on that is workarounds, and I suppose when we went into lockdown 1, I quickly discovered that the version of Microsoft that we have in our business, it doesn't support Teams. So we went on to Zoom, and whilst you can talk to MPs and parliamentary committees on Zoom, you can't talk to Network Rail or HS2 or any other part of government. And so when we were running our early webinars, we'd find people would be coming in on their children's iPads and things like that. And we've all got, the colleague with the password stuck on a Post-it note, or those things. How do we manage that sort of human behavior to find the workaround that keeps your life easy but is probably a loophole? Emma?
See, this for me is one of the key aspects of building a resilient organization, and it really drills down to that multidisciplinary approach to security. And that's not just talking about the different teams involved, but it's talking about engaging the users and becoming secure by design, because people, we like to take the easiest route, and if things become difficult, workarounds are a reality of life. But what an organization can do is speak to those people and understand what it is, why are they adopting these workarounds? What is it about the process or the policy, the procedure, the technology that is making them or forcing their hand to engage in these workarounds? People aren't going to be very forthcoming about this type of behavior, because largely they'll know that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But when you have competing objectives of getting the job done quickly and efficiently versus getting it done securely, often you're going to get more of a pat on the back getting it done quickly than you are getting it done securely. So it's about creating a security culture which is open and safe, and that your security team is approachable, so that when they're having these conversations, these honest and open conversations with individuals, they understand why people are doing what they're doing, so that amendments can be made to the environment, the cyber environment or the physical environment, to make it easier for them and to work with the workarounds rather than against them.
Is that something you've come across, Marie?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Emma's fundamentally right. It is around how you communicate. It's around how you make it come to life. I also think it's about how you make it context relevant. So with whatever, one of the challenges that we had in the business was that people have very different levels of understanding and knowledge of technology. So to make something relevant to somebody that's never used technology but is having to now start to use that, to make it then relevant to somebody that's just come straight out of uni and their whole life revolves around their phone and their online presence, it's really difficult to get that balance right. But I do think creating an environment where you can be open and honest, so that there's no penalty for reporting a cyber, something suspicious. If you've clicked on something, we would much rather know that you've done that than not know. So creating that environment that actively encourages people to report potential security incidents where something doesn't look right, where they've done something they're not sure about, and actually engaging people with why did you do that? If you have had an incident, why did that incident happen and what can we learn from that? Yeah, I think Emma hit the nail on the head. with that.
Okay, look, we've got one last question, and we're up against the hour. So let me land this one, and then we'll wrap up. Where should the industry prioritise its efforts over the next 12 months to reduce cyber risk? Daniel, one for you, perhaps. Where would you like to see me go first?
I think risk assessment very clearly. The easy way is start to understand what you have, how that's configured, and where the risks really lie. Because I think most people are blind actually at the minute today.
Emma, from your perspective?
It's about working towards building a better cybersecurity culture and understanding that cybersecurity isn't just for that team of individuals who have cybersecurity in their job title. Everybody has a responsibility and needs to own that and understand that.
And finally, Marie.
I'd probably say collaboration. So finding a way that we can share and learn and work together as an industry, and particularly around digital skills and cyber skills. You know, we can't all afford to employ a cybersecurity specialist, but as an industry we can. So how we can collaborate to drive those things through the industry.
Lovely. Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock, so I think we're through the majority of the questions, and obviously, if you have had a question or you think of one later that you want to talk to someone about, either contact Marie, Daniel, or Emma directly, or come through Yvonne and myself, and we will put you in touch. So please don't feel if you think of something later that you can't get it answered. But it just falls to me then to say thank you to all three of you for your time today, for speaking. Really interesting set of presentations and different angles on the same question, but as ever, lots of overlaps and lots of things to think about it going forward. And I've certainly made quite a lot of notes that I'll be reflecting on as we go forward. So thank you all very much. A reminder to those of you who are on, if you want the slides, please do come to Yvonne, and we'll have the recording up online on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it, or indeed hack it if you really want to. That's desire later on. But thank you all very much. Do keep your eye on our webinar programme. We've got some more in development that'll be coming out for booking this side of the summer break. But meanwhile, thank you all very much, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.